If Yaldabaoth is the soul and the chief over seven major heavens, for each heaven there is a correlation to the seven spheres of the causal body, which is connected to your soul, okay, which is around you, which is where your psyches are also in and rooted inside into your consciousness as well. So, for example, I am as the soul, and the references to, so I am is also reference to the sun and or as the godhead of this specific universe that we exist in. Thus, may also control the appetites of the mind, given that it may be tied into the seven chakras as well, these seven psyches. There's also another reference that also brings the archons to in as a metaphorical reference to the psyche of the human, and these are referenced as well as the seven sins. For example, when the seven deadly sins, as we know them, not to originate from the Greeks or Romans, but that it's always been there, that people have always referred to it. There's Aristotle, who has listed several positive healthy human attributes, for example, excellence of or virtues, which he referred humans to have, as well as, and he also argues that for each positive quality, there are also two perhaps negative vices or counter attributes with every as well. Okay. The Son, as I've said, when I am is also referenced as Godhead. The Godhead or I am is also related to the centralized focus of intelligence. So, the next quote, in the Mysteries from Manly P. Hall, cited from the Secret Teachings of All Ages. In the Mysteries, the seven logi or creative lords, we know that these are psyches or faculties of the mind or psychologies of the soul or the spirit, are shown as streams of force issuing from the mouth of the Eternal One. Okay? This signifies the spectrum being extracted from the white light of the Supreme Deity, wherever outside of the universe, energy coming into this head, Godhead, and then coming out of the mouth. Okay, the seven creators or fabricators of the inferior spheres were called by the Jewish people the Elohim. By the Egyptians, they were referenced or referred to as the builders or sometimes governors, and are depicted with great knives in their hands while they're carving up the universe from the primordial system. And then worship of the planets is based upon their acceptation as the cosmic embodiment of the seven creative attributes of God. So let's put it this way. We have seven aspects within ourselves, seven creative forces, which can be chaotic if we don't control it, or if we don't understand it. If we feel chaotic within ourselves, our psychic abilities will be chaotic. If we feel at peace with our psychic abilities or psychic gifts, we will be at peace and have a peaceful outlook. And these are also connected to the soul, which is connected to the I am, which is here, which creates, the builder of the universe. Every day we build on this universe. Okay. These are also referenced as the lords of the planets and described as dwelling within the body of the sun, or not necessarily the sun, but the Godhead of the sun, for the true nature of the sun being analogous to the white light contains the seed of all the tones and colors, potencies which it manifests. So speaking the words I am speaks, and in it there's a voice, there's a tone, there's a color to it, a frequency, and it creates. Remember I said to you that Yaldabaoth is the head is the sun or a lion, which is reference to the sun as well. This is why I'm referring to this, your soul, as the Godhead, and the snake body which is connected to this immediate environment, which is your universe. Okay. Uh, then there's a guy called Basilides who taught that the existence of a great archon called Abraxas, who presided over 365 archons in the material Irenaeus. About the ancient astronomy taught that above the seven planetary spheres was an eighth, the sphere of the fixed stars. So all seven are within you, outside of the and inside of this universe, and outside of the universe is the eighth sphere. Abraxas is a mystical word made up of Greek letters, and funny enough that it's made up of, and it is referred to by some sources as uh, a word which has magical properties when used in spelling. These magical properties were often inscribed on either charms or amulets. So they had great. I wanted to speak to the thing that's in control of the 365 days of this solar system, 12 months of the year and 7 weeks. And this is also again reference to the 7 days of the week, 365 days and 12 months. Uh, the archons were associated with the seven visible planets as well and perceived as agents of the demiurge, predatory beings who inhibit spiritual awakening by convincing humanity of a false reality, forces of sin and temptation. The seven visible planets are Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Sun, Mercury, and the Moon. And we also know now that the archons are connected to the astrological clock or mechanics of this solar system, which is like very much in control of our psychic abilities. Archons are described as androgynous with animal faces. They are crude, lustful, and they try to rape spiritual Eve. She turns into a tree in reaction. They defile the shadow she leaves behind physical as the physical Eve. So these attributes of the air, principalities of the air, have animalistic energies to it. Remember when I referenced to that when you look at the tiger, you start to connect with the tiger on a spiritual level. It becomes your animal totem, and you absorb that energy. You become connected to that creature. You then inherit that as well. But human um, traits in terms of, well, animalistic traits in terms of human appetites is also something for you to consider when you look at what these things are, and that these things that yes, you get crude, lustful, and angry, aggressive attributes to humanity as well. Therefore, you must look at this as a that it is a personification or an morphosizing aspect or element to something that actually is just based on human appetites and the psychic abilities that one has. Um, if we give that those if we give thought and belief to those attributes that they actually exist as physiological creatures that are hanging somewhere around there with these wings and they're prodding you with a fork or something like that, you're going to start creating that, and you actually create it where you become subjective to your creation, where you are then the slave of that system, where it is then connecting with you and attacking you. Okay, so we're looking at this as actually a case of reflection. Archons, as in references to also the shadow aspect of the original seven, being formless and pure of light, end quote. Archons being the shadow sides of reflection means your seven qualities that you've got a shadow side to it as well. Because remember, we're living in a dual world. Archons are basically the shadow side of you. Because remember, I said they created the dual world for everybody to believe in and to live in, and eventually it became like that. I'm talking about the Gnostics. Okay, so there's a shadow side of everything, just like the lion or solar being or soul can be depicted as Yaldabaoth is depicted in reflection as the dragon or feminine principalities as well, something for you to take note of. Through it all, the human spirit, the female spiritual presence or pneumatica, who calls to epinoia or insight to see her reflection. So reflection can be taken into two frames of thought. One is connected to the self-reflection, and the other is to become aware of your own expression towards something, where you look at yourself from both sides. The Lord of the universe is not rightly called Father, but Forefather. For the Father is the beginning of what is visible. For he, the Lord, is the beginningless forefather. He sees himself within himself, like a mirror, having appeared in his likeness as self-father, that is, self-begetter, and as confronter. When you look within yourself and you actually look and you see you've made a mistake, or you look at something with internal reflection. The mirror is when you have the insight to look within. So it's a matter of the impulses of the thoughts. A case of thoughts and impulses in the mind. Quote, from the consenting of those I have just mentioned, thoughts appeared in the aeons that exist. From thoughts, reflecting, from reflecting, considering, from considering, rationalities, from rationalities, wills, from wills to words. And then we look at the other aspect of the archons as well, which are also referenced as the 12 powers, which is also being discussed in association with the archons. And the places where these seven heavens or seven spheres of chaos is situated inside, in terms of the 12 cranial nerves from the head. And there's a reason why I'm giving you this information, so you could see that these things are inside of your head. These are the archons, 12 of them as well, mentioned here. And in the material, quote, therefore our aeons came to be as the type of immortal man. Time came to be as the type of first begetter, his son. The year came to be as the type of savior. This is their words. This is what they've written. The 12 months came to be as the type of 12 powers. The 360 days of the year came to be as the 360 powers who appeared from Savior. Their hours and moments came to be as the type of the angels who came from them, who is without a number. Okay, written from John, Apocrypha, from added his little story into the Nag Hammadi as well. So you get it again. There's a veneration of time. Time is now given powers. You see, and powers can control whatever is being put into place. In terms of time, time is the controlling ruler. Okay, in association with the previous that I've just read to you now. So also 12 apostles, and according to the secret book of John, there remains an active force working with humanity in paradise, referenced as the mother of the living or the spiritual Eve. This then is reference to the spirit of your immortal spirit and the power of that. And the subject of the archon is also referenced in the following material. And this is also a classical example of mirroring. Archons are also the shadow aspects of the original seven, being formless and pure of light, and are also responsible for each part of your body and limb. Okay, then So I think it's suffice to say that we can see that there's been a great deal of disagreements in terms of material that people have put in place. Some argued about time, time that should not have existed as evil, and some said time is good. Others said this one is bad, then that one's good, then this is woman, then this is a man. So it's been a big it's been thrown in to create a deal of chaos for in within everyone who's really been trying to find certain information, um, and then subsequently started to just ditch all these things and just went within and just started finding these things out for themselves from within. So we can also see that amongst the Jewish people, the Phoenicians and Greek people, they related that Moses called the god Yah or Yah, and Yah of the Hebrews, and Yaldabaoth is the fiery serpent of Moses, who becomes the serpent, brass serpent spoken about in scriptures. So the veneration of the soul as the healer. So that thing that gives you the teachings, that this thing that is attached to you but is not permanent to you, that thing that is a personification of whatever you believe in terms of your impulses that you experience, whether you feel happy, sad, or emotional. These impulses are then reflected through your psychic powers or your psychic gifts or the seven chakras into 7 days of the week, which is correlating with the astrological energy that you are surrounded with in this universe. So you are bound by these things unless you choose not to become bound by it. So, how do we see how we have been duped by these things? How do we notice? How do we see what is there that we need to look for to help us to understand how we do not become affected by these things that were put in place? And it basically, if we want to see the role that we play in this great story, we need to actually see how we can fit, how we fit in. And I've been giving you information and hinting, so that you could sort of gather where I was going with this. Time seems to be a very important thing, which is being mentioned in most of these things. We can actually say time is part of it. So if we believe in time, we bind ourselves into the actual world itself. That's part of the contract that we take when we come in here. But it is also variable and also spatial to you, your personal frequency, and how you exist, and how things fluctuate around you. That means that upon the entry into the plane of existence, as I've said to you from the beginning, you are bound by the celestial times that you have synced to, but not controlled by, which is important. Every time someone enters the plane of existence, they are literally birthed as similar to a god through the insemination of thoughts, ideas, fire, water, the amniotic fluid, the primordial waters in the body, water as the electricity of energy and of light, which is a current that runs right through your body. Um, and for us to be in that space. So there is a payoff. There is an energetic payoff when we are here. And we learn through these mythologies and what we observe, that all which exists is and was and will always operate from within us, not from outside, not from around us, but from within us. We are the ones that are controlling these motions, these machinations of this process. And it happens through our internal observation with regards to how we perceive things, how we give it life, by believing or being or choosing to become subjective to that specific mythology or that story. So if I tell you what are archons, you probably have no more fear, because you look at this now with an objective view that these are just principalities of the air, of thoughts, of consciousness. But now, how do we differentiate between our knowledge, our awareness, our experiences, our our light, which is eternal. We know what the soul is. We know what the soul is capable of. We know what it can do, how it creates. We also know that if we look at something according to the double slit theory, that we basically can create something by just observing it. We become still within ourselves. We become aware that these things are based on, that everything is based on a mythology. Everything is based on a script. Everything is based on an idea that has been propagated or put in place by someone or something, perhaps before you were born in this timeline. And by looking at it with with an awareness, with an objective awareness, instead of becoming involved and reactive to that story. Because if you do become reactive to that story, you give that story life. You give it light and you give it life and you create it into a life force, which then operates as something that is part of your universe, that it then is part of the boogeyman that is in your cupboard. Okay, you start looking at it from that perspective, and all that remains to be truthful for you is what you experience, what you do with your daily activities, how you connect with people around you, how you respond and when you share information. And that with each myth there is a new god. The cosmos and the universe using the recording consciousness of humanity, because the conscious mind repeats what it is being taught and processes the subconscious mind to accept it. It's kind of brainwashing yourself. Uh, Free will. It's like taking part in a video game where you agree to play the role, except we forgot that we were only characters in a story. You do not associate with your character, but you don't discard your body. You don't discard your physical form that you're living in, but you don't become involved emotionally or enmeshed in that drama. Okay? We have two worlds residing within us, two parts of our brain, and two sides to us, the consciousness and the subconscious, the visible and the invisible. And when we lean towards beliefs, light and dark, when we lean towards those beliefs, we literally create a split within ourselves. We divide ourselves between in two parts. Our journey is essentially to become whole, to be whole, to know that we've always been whole, but to know that we are in a role that we are playing a part in, to understand more about ourselves. So when you're in an emotional situation, when you're in a situation that demands you to react in a specific way, you choose to decide how you will respond to it. It's your choice. It is your free will. Unfortunately, unfortunately, these mythologies and these creative myths and these stories have all been written by philosophies and ideas and thoughts and things that write a story so entertaining that you don't know what to do but fall into it, fall in love with it, to fall, to descend from where you are within your consciousness, that you literally give away your position and you become subjective to that story. And that story is a word. It's based on words that, remember when I said to you in the beginning, that the universe is a united view, one eye view on the triangle, one eye on the story. Everybody's unitedly looking at the same story. Everything is governed as a particle of light. There is not one single object that is not a proton or a light particle. Light also formulates in the neural pathways in the brain. And this is where the light is visible through the body at all times, not only from the higher self or spirit, but also the soul. And if we know that we are light, light attracts light. Doesn't matter what it is. Water is actually crystal technology, but in fluid form. When you do something amazing, it becomes crystallized. That is your water. That is what water does inside of you. It's your technology. Your higher self or your spirit is the source of your light, filtering through your soul in and into your body. You are able to even manipulate your body and its natural motor functions through meditation, for example, igniting your soul and switching on your brain as a remote controlled device that you know it is, and that the soul is a metaphor for the symbol. It is an interpreter of everything that is symbolically around you, and you decide in your higher consciousness how you perceive that. Remember, an interface between you and the world. The soul is the interface. So if there's something wrong with the LCD of this computer screen, you need to change it. There is, however, something else that we need to be taking, that we need to take in consideration, and I'm speaking about these things that are around us in terms of bacteria. Everything that is alive has a bacterial or viral presence to it, and these things are like the common cold or stomach bug or whatever you want to call it. But because it's so basically what I want to try and explain to you is there are parasites that are around us, and these parasites are essentially things that we've woven into the beliefs of our creator myths and given it power over us, so much so that you've basically taken an ant and you've turned it into a giant octopus to control you. Be mindful of that. That is like you've given that parasite life. I've done a bit of research on this thing. That's how I can understand and differentiate what I'm actually looking at. I'm not looking at an archon, I'm not looking at an aeon, I'm not looking at a dragon or a spider or this or this or that or that or that, which is interfering and wrapping itself around the planet and wanting to kill you. I'm seeing more than that. I'm seeing, yeah, and then there's a bacterial infection that is around that functions on the energetic frequency that we have on this planet, as a given that it's always been there, like the common cold, it's always been there. And these are not archons. These things are just parasites, which I call parasite. What is a parasite? A parasite is something that parasitizes on your energetic, etheric energy. So these things are etheric. They exist around us. They're amplified with electrical stimulation and impulses. So if you give an electrical light stimulation or impulse to referencing it as something else, remember, you create, you give that thing a stronger presence of existence. You turn the ant into a giant something else. You create, it's like, for example, your belief can make the thing become stronger or not. Okay, I have a picture of this thing. I've made a sketch of it, and I will present it to you for you to look at. And I'm going to give you my notes on it. Okay. So when I look at it, I have cleared a lot of energy to see these things. It must be noted that the parasite has overcome all sense of emotional disposition. So it is not emotional. Okay. It is void from emotion, of emotion. It does not only go for the lower frame of emotional lows or higher frames or of emotional highs. It does not pick you if you feel sad or happy, or if you're doing great or if you're doing bad. It is just there. Okay, it is a perchance thing that it happens to be there. Okay, some people have given themselves over to those impulses that thing is there. So the first thing you notice is people become devoid of emotion. That's how you know that this thing has infested that person. There is no emotion. There's no high, there's no low. There's just like in between, like strange, dead, zombie-like sense of emotion. It's just dead. Okay? And I'm speaking about what I've observed now. Okay? The only way for you to get rid of this, if you can look at the image that I'm giving to you, the only way that you can get rid of it is if you start to change how you think about yourself. Number one, that you are not a victim. Number two, there's the creative myths and stories, and the whole time that I've elaborated on this entire thing about what the Gnostics have created, and everybody has just fallen for all of these stories and have given it life, and it became alive on its own. And seeing that for what it is, and then looking at that and seeing that for what it is, you have then an ultimate sense of freedom that you have never been able to understand, ever. You have a sense of freedom to see it, to feel it. What I'm trying to explain to you is you starve your focus on that thing that you've called an archon. You starve it by withdrawing from that awareness light. You pull your light away from it. In other words, you draw your light away from it, back into yourself. It must be starved by first stating a revocation, which helps, and it will be at the end of the description, or you can email me for it. And to cleanse your thoughts, to understand this body of material which I've shared with you, because this is very important material, that these emotional things that you're going through, these stresses, these dramas, these traumas, these abuses and things that you go through, look at these things as isolated. Okay? Don't give it more life. Don't give it more power. Don't give it more control over you. Because the more you give it, the more you look at it from a victim perspective, the more you will place yourself underneath it. Okay? Such as the awareness of its existing firstly, and to thoroughly clear it from within your awareness. Revocation will help with that problem. It is a difficult problem. It's difficult to get out of that state. Then the second thing that must be noted is that the parasite is made up of a dual spectrum light source, which means it is based on light. We are of light. Light attracts light. It's a bug. Okay, it thus comes as a thought because our thoughts come to us as light. So when you think about something and there's something that then resonates or tries to key into your frequency, that thing is there. Okay? So whatever you think, if you're thinking something, anything random, like talking about apples, there's something that resonates with that sense of you thinking about apples. Now you're aware of that. So how do you change that? You change your frequency about the apple. So your sense of an apple is, don't become emotional when you think about an apple, just think about an apple. You can do that. Work on that. It also is connected through tentacles. Unfortunately, it looks pretty much like a big fat worm with tentacles attached to it. And these worms, these tentacles then prod and taste things that's part of your skull. So if you have a pain in your head, in the back of your neck, it likes to go there. This parasite likes to get there. It locks in to and drains from the cerebral cortex and burrows into the pituitary gland or the hypothalamus, and eventually the medulla oblongata, and later into the spinal cord. People that you know been under, well, I know of someone that I love and care very much for who has been taken over by this thing. Person is now walking like this. Okay, there's no reason for this person to walk like that. but this thing affects that, okay? This is the feeding ground because there's life. It's like you can't throw organic food into a dustbin without with not and not expect flies to come out of there. Okay. It learns by way of introducing emotional aspects. Then it takes it. Then whatever it does, what it does is it takes that same light that it has that you've got, imitates it to you. You connect with it because you then feel it's from somewhere outside of you, and then it uses that frequency. Like I said, remember, there's no interest in stories, in your story, in your ideas, your feelings, your moods, your changes, nothing like that. I think perhaps more diet related aspects perhaps assist you, and supplements to take to counter or be aware of it. But what I've been doing is whenever I feel a slight uncomfortability in the back of my head, or from here to there at the back, or in my neck, I then take a deep breath, and then I make myself aware that I have to change my frequency. And I'm telling you, it changes like that. It changes immediately. That discomfort starts to move away from me. But it takes a while for you to become aware of it, become used to it. As long as you're aware that your light, which is eternal, which has a soul that does its own thing, which you need to control, how you perceive things, is what you need to take away from this for you to be able to understand that you are not subjected to any story that's been written to control you from any dizzying height or historical story from somewhere else. You know that you have more control than you think you have. The most important thing to consider once more is to take note of how we are used to carry the myth forward. Their myths, stories, the script. We know every story needs an audience. You have to allow certain codes or frequencies to shift you into another thought field, a field that cannot be keyed into. The interfering of entities are interdimensional, or the interference of parasites are interdimensional. This means that the human frequency has to be altered or adjusted. At all times, you have to be aware of that. Interdimensional beings or energies are is essence operating from a frequency that is thus connected to your basic root chakra frequency because of trauma. It's the easiest place to get to. Changing the frequency is thus suggested to change the energy, the energetic transference from the interdimensional parasite. It must also be understood that the base chakra is connected to basic survival and fears, basic and primary functions, which denotes that the frequency being used by the energy attackers are in the lower base frequency, and is also related to the primary creation of humanity. All traumas and wounds that are stuck in our core of our existences requires healing. Make peace with your shadow, make peace with it. This healing is a process of internal work, and it takes time. Remember that all energy anomalies that you have been experiencing from time to time have all manifested itself into the conscious and subconscious levels of your soul. This is where the pattern is held in place. Change. You are higher consciousness, you are great spirit, and you are in control of your soul. We have to fight energy with energy and amp up our energy, our frequency, and how we look at things and how we look at ourselves. The higher your frequency, the less you can feel affected and are affected by interdimensional parasites. Thank you, everybody, for your time and for listening to this. We will speak again. Much love. Bye.